Salutations and welcome back to Colin's Last Stand right here on YouTube. My name is Colin Moriarty, and I'm finally here in Santa Monica, California, and oh my god, I'm looking in the corner of the room, and there's a spider there. So, that's fucking fantastic. So I'm here in the spare bedroom of my new apartment in Santa Monica. My new apartment's fucking awesome. I'm so happy that Erin and I were able to find it and secure it as our own. As you can see, I've been out in the sun. I'm getting a little tan, kind of bringing out that olive Italian hue that I used to have in my younger years. Although I'm a little concerned that with the tanness also comes out the gray hair. Like I realize more and more that I have all this gray hair that when I was a little more pale, blended in a little bit better. And now it's really not a good situation. I'm becoming very salt and pepper. Salt and Pepper, like hair, not Salt and Pepper, the hip-hop group. So I'm in the studio, I'm in the room that I'm going to be doing the show in moving forward, which I'm really excited about. But this isn't the final setup, obviously. I'm in this little comfortable chair. Actually, you probably can't even really see it, but Erin and I bought a couch and the chair just kind of came with it and we didn't know, so lucky us. So what I wanted to explore today was this idea of far right. What does the far right mean? And about how I feel like this term, whether rightly or wrongly, is being used in a pejorative way and in a way to alienate and isolate political candidates and political ideas in ways that I think are somewhat unfair. And how the political ideologies that we use today in the kind of left-right spectrum is not only outdated, but really just insufficient. It's just an insufficient way to describe a person's political ideologies and political character, political beliefs based on this left-right spectrum. It's just not good enough. And what I've noticed is that by casting people as far right, whether it's Donald Trump or whether it's more recently Marine Le Pen, this is done to make them seem strange or out of the ordinary or outside of the mainstream. And they might be, but still, is Marine Le Pen really far right? Is Donald Trump really far right? Well, I don't think so, and I'm going to get into that today. The reason I started thinking about this was actually with the French election between Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen. I don't know how to say these names in you know, the French dialect, in the French accent, which is sad because I took French in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 2 years in college. So I was really paying very close attention, as you can see. Sorry, Madame Gerard. She was my teacher. And I realized in the Macron-Le Pen race that they kept talking about how Macron is a centrist, which made him seem very appealing to everyone, and Le Pen was far right. And as of the time I'm recording this video, in fact, the race is over. It's Sunday as I'm recording this. The polls closed and immediately the press had declared Macron the winner, and that's not a huge surprise. I was actually surprised by how much he won. I thought the polling might have been a little off, but it wasn't. It seems like he's going to win by like 25 or 30 points, which is a massive landslide. Le Pen didn't stand a chance. And anyone who really thought Le Pen was going to win, really going to win, I think was a little bit delusional. Although I did say over and over again that I wouldn't believe that Le Pen would lose until she actually lost, because who knows with the polling, who knows with the conventional wisdom, who knows what the hell's going on today. Look at Brexit, look at the Trump election, etc. and so on. And the big question here that I wanted to kind of confront is, what does far right really mean in terms of the way the press uses it, the mainstream media uses it? And how is it used in a pejorative way to alienate and make people look strange? And the fact is I already know that Donald Trump isn't far right here in the United States. I've known that for a long time as someone who considers himself right-wing and conservative and was a Republican before Donald Trump became the standard bearer of the party. I knew that this man was not far right or even really that right at all. But I knew less about Marine Le Pen, and I was super curious as I saw Reuters and the AP and the New York Times and whoever else talking about how far right candidate, far right candidate, far right candidate, far right candidate, Marine Le Pen. I don't know much about French politics at all, and so I wanted to do a little research. Well, is this really true? Does this really line up with reality? And the answer I found was no. The label of far right for Marine Le Pen doesn't line up with reality at all, any more than the far right label of Donald Trump lines up at all, any more than the centrist label of Emmanuel Macron lines up with him at all either, and we'll get into that in a second. These labels are used in ways to divide and in ways to prop up certain candidates and make them seem reasonable and normal and hurt and injure other candidates, and I think that's pretty clear. But I wanted to get into exactly why that was, because I didn't know anything about Le Pen, and I wanted to research her positions and see where she stood. And I was actually shocked by not only some of the positions she held, but by how far left many of her positions were. But I don't see her being described as far left ever. So Marine Le Pen is right-wing and far-right in obvious ways. She's an ardent nationalist, which is typically associated, although not always, but typically associated with the right wing. She's super anti-immigration and anti-illegal immigration, but really anti-immigration of any kind. It looked like she wanted to reduce legal immigration to France by something like 95%. So that certainly makes her a far-right sort of person. She was really staunch and is really staunch on speaking out against Islamic terrorism and the rise of Islam in Europe, which again, I think is somewhat of a normal stance to take. I mean, just look at what's going on in Europe the last couple of years. It's absolutely fucking nuts. But nonetheless, that does make her somewhat right-wing. And she believes in the sovereignty of her nation, which for some reason is a right-wing issue these days, but nonetheless, she wants to get out of the European Union, she wants to get France off of the euro, etc. and so on. So yes, in those ways, Marine Le Pen is right-wing or far right-wing, depending on how you want to look at it. But the story doesn't end there, because there are all these things that make her centrist or left-wing. First of all, she's an ardent protectionist, and this is another thing that I kind of talk about with Donald Trump. I believe in levels of protection as well. Protectionism is not right-wing. Protectionism is left-wing. Protectionism means government interferes with the economy. The right-wing position is that the government doesn't interfere with the economy. The right-wing position is that the government has few regulations that deal with the larger economy or banking or anything like that. And if you want to get far-right, since Marine Le Pen is considered far-right, well, that's an open, unfettered, totally unregulated free market. That is not what Marine Le Pen or Donald Trump believe in. They believe that the government should interfere in the market to even things out for their domestic workers and their domestically made products. So Marine Le Pen is not far right in terms of that, but it gets even worse. As I was reading about her with the guise of far right in my mind, I was surprised to learn that not only does Marine Le Pen not believe in the privatization of certain government benefits that French people get, but she's actually for the expansion of many of those benefits, and she's for the protection via the government of those specific things that the French people rely on from the government. It's not a right-wing position. I was surprised to learn that Marine Le Pen doesn't want to privatize any utilities. In fact, quite the opposite. She wants the government to control these things and to make them open in an egalitarian sort of way for everyone in France. Again, that is very left-wing. Another left-wing thing that Marine Le Pen believes is to separate the banking systems, again, the way they used to be. For instance, there are depositor banks, like deposit banks like what we use, a Bank of America, a Wells Fargo, a Citibank, whatever. Separate them from the investment banks, the Wall Street bankers, the Goldman Sachs of the world, the Merrill Lynches of the world. She wants to separate those things. And in fact, she even talked about nationalizing the banks for a limited amount of time during that particular transition. No one on the right is talking about nationalizing banks. No one on the right is even really talking about separating the idea of the investment bank from the deposit bank. Marine Le Pen is, but apparently far right. And it gets even crazier than that the more you read about her. She's pro-choice, she's pro-secularism, she's anti-death penalty, and when it comes down to, for me, is the obvious. Marine Le Pen has some far-right ideas, but if you take it all into account, she doesn't seem that out of the ordinary to me. I personally don't know many pro-choice far-right people. I certainly don't know that many people on the far right that are against the death penalty. I certainly don't know that many people on the far right that want to nationalize banks. I'm certainly not really one to know many people on the far right that believe that utilities should be public, that nothing should be privatized. I mean, this idea is insane, and I think what happened is pretty obvious. Marine Le Pen might be out of the mainstream, but she's not that out of the mainstream. And a lot of this is because of the party she deals with, the National Front. The National Front was founded by her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who is definitely a racist, definitely a bigot, and was so racist and so bigoted, in fact, that Marine Le Pen herself kicked her father out of the party and apparently is completely estranged from him. But it seems like she's going to pay the price, as she paid the price against Macron. She's going to pay the price moving forward for her association with her father and for being her father's daughter, I guess. And maybe it was a stupid idea to take the existing party and try to make it into something more modern and more moderate. But nonetheless, Marine Le Pen isn't far right. At least not from what I can tell. I literally just told you all the things she believes in. If you take all that together and combine it, does that seem like a far right position to you? Meanwhile, Emmanuel Macron is considered a centrist. And again, I think this is another way to make him seem palatable to a vast amount of people. Apparently Macron is a centrist, even though he served in Francois Hollande's administration. Hollande, of course, being an ardent socialist. Oh, and by the way, Macron himself registered socialist until a few years ago. But no, he's a centrist. Emmanuel Macron is a centrist, everybody. No doubt about it. And this is what happened to Donald Trump, too. And I'm certainly no fan of Donald Trump, as you guys know. I was so aghast by him, and not his positions, but by his demeanor and his lack of decorum and his lack of normalcy and his lack of experience and all those kinds of things that I left the Republican Party straight up over him after I voted for John Kasich. And just as an aside, I don't regret that vote at all. John Kasich was one of the only adults on the stage. I think we all know that now. But nonetheless, this happened with Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton too, in which he was cast as far right. He was a far right nationalist. He's a Nazi. He's a fascist. Donald Trump was openly for gay rights. As far as I can tell, really one of the first people to ever run for president that was for gay marriage. And I think the first person that won the presidency the first time he ran as someone who was a proponent of gay marriage. But no, he's far right. Donald Trump wants to protect blue-collar and middle-class workers with protectionist policies, which is completely antithetical to right-wing polity. But no, Donald Trump was far right. Donald Trump literally stood on the stage with a gay pride flag in North Carolina, I believe. One of the best pictures from the campaign, one of the most ridiculous pictures from the campaign that no one ever saw because, of course, they wanted to hide it because it would make their entire narrative fall apart. But there he was. Far-right Donald Trump with his gay pride flag on the stage in North Carolina. Go figure. And listen, it's not limited to this time now, and the problem isn't limited to Le Pen versus Macron or Trump versus Clinton or anything like that. It's not limited to these particular instances. The political paradigm and the political spectrum is always twisted and always changed and morphed. The Whigs became the Republicans in the 1850s. Obviously, 1860, 1861, Abraham Lincoln, elected and then sworn in as president as the first Republican candidate, freed the slaves. The Democrats were the slaveholders. Obviously, things have changed since then, right? Obviously, the paradigm has changed a little bit. Teddy Roosevelt, my favorite president, a son of Long Island, was considered a progressive, even though he was a Republican, and actually ran on a progressive platform. But progressivism isn't really something that is associated with Republicanism anymore. Hell, John F. Kennedy would have been a Republican if he ran today. And the Southern strategy completely flipped the geographic locations of the parties and kind of how the Republican Party is now associated with the South and the Democratic Party kind of associated with the North and the Northeast. Completely opposite of the way they were in the Civil War. So yes, things change, and we're obviously at an inflection point in our politics, and that is a serious problem indeed, because the inflection point and the changes that are happening on the political spectrum are not keeping up with the way we talk about politics. And the left, right, Democrat, Republican, whatever it might be in your country, in Europe, or in South America, or wherever you are right now, I think you can agree it's just not adequate anymore to describe the way we feel. It's certainly not adequate for the way I feel. And when I was reading about Marine Le Pen and I was looking a little more into Donald Trump and Macron and the Clinton kind of campaign and all this kind of stuff, I realized, well, it doesn't really describe me that well either. I believe in small government and low taxation, but I also believe the government serves some sort of purpose. I believe that we shouldn't privatize the police, we shouldn't privatize prisons, we shouldn't privatize the military. There are certain things that we as a people should do together. I'm pro-choice, I'm pro-gay marriage, I believe in the decriminalization of drugs, I believe in the legalization of prostitution. These aren't right-wing ideas, so where do I fit? And I think this is a question a lot of you guys are asking yourselves as well. Where do you fit? And yes, the left-right political spectrum seems to be broken, but so too is the north-south kind of authoritarian libertarian spectrum as well. That seems to, in a good nature and in a good way, try to flesh everything out, but still it's just not adequate enough. And it goes back to this idea of the horseshoe theory, right? The idea that the political spectrum isn't a line, but actually a horseshoe, that the closer you get to the edges of the horseshoe, the more like the other side you become. And I often talked about it in a way of saying the political spectrum is not a line, but a circle. And if you fall on the bottom of the circle, in the middle, you're in the center, and then as you go to the left or right, you kind of get the polar extremes, but the more extreme you get, the closer you get to each other until you get to like fascism and communism, for instance, which are somewhat indistinguishable in a lot of different ways. The more authoritarian you get, the more left or right you get. The more nationalist you get, the more left or right you get. The more one party you get, the more left or right you get, etc. and so on. So they end up connecting, even though they seem like they're at odds with each other. And that seems like a more adequate and rational way to describe our politics, but it's still not good enough. We need a new way to describe ourselves. And I'll save it for another video for another time, but I really do believe that the solution is probably something along the lines of, say, an independent party that's actually a real third party. That's not just, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, I'm not right or left, I'm just in the middle. But no, you have to define what that means, and that's something I really want to explore in the weeks, months, and years to come, because I think that there is a viable third way forward that lets us not worry about these problems around us, lets us not worry about these arbitrary labels that seek to sink someone like Donald Trump or seek to sink someone like Marine Le Pen, but rather a viable way that says, like, we're not associated with you and we're not associated with you, we're associated with us, and here's what we believe. We don't only not believe what you say, and we not only believe what you say, but we actually believe in this third way, and here it is, blah. And I really think that we should explore that moving forward. So anyway, I'm curious what you guys think about this. I was, watching with great interest the Le Pen election, because I just wanted to see how well she did. I thought she would lose by more like 15 points again. I was totally off on that. But I was so fascinated with the description of her as far right, and I'm like, is it true? Why is everyone describing her like this? And it must be true, right? And it's not. It's not true. I mean, I don't see how you take that entire platform and combine it and it becomes far right. It doesn't make sense. So the character assassinations are in full swing, and we all know that. Being anywhere on the right, of course, is going to be cause for character assassination by many, but there are some problems on the right that we need to deal with as well, just as there are many problems on the left we have to deal with as well. And this just brings me more and more to the middle. But nonetheless, I can't stand how dishonest the media is. I guess we shouldn't be really surprised, though, should we? Nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember, this is totally fan-funded. You'll notice that there are no baked-in ads or advertisements. I'm not even running ads as we speak on YouTube at all. So the only source of revenue for this show is on Patreon at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. I hope you choose to join me there. If not, that's okay. No big deal. Please thumb up the video or thumb it down if you didn't like it, I guess. Leave comments. Be good to each other in the comments there on YouTube. Join us on Reddit, on Facebook, on Twitter, wherever you want. And, of course, keep on learning.